Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA Show. It's Wednesday. I'm Dave DeFore here with Mo DeKeel and Seth Partnow. So that means it's Nerder, she wrote. Guys, a little bit of big news to wake up to this morning or go to bed to if you were watching CNN last night. We got a new coach in Milwaukee. Of course, Adrian Griffin was fired yesterday, halfway through his first season as a head coach, which is, that's a bummer. But it seems like Doc Rivers is going to take over and right the ship for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are currently second in the East. We've talked a lot this season about Adrian Griffin and some of the struggles that he's had as a coach. Seth, Mo, we've pointed out the excellent offense that you're just destined to have because you have Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. There's no work to be done there. But defensively, this team was 22nd in the NBA. And this is a defense that features Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo. That is completely unacceptable. And I'm assuming that the defense is a large part of the reason why Adrian Griffin is out of there. But let's talk about Griff first before we get to the Doc part of this. Mo, they struggled. Transition defense was just a mess. Half-court defense wasn't really much better when you were watching the tape. Maybe the numbers look a little bit better, but I felt like they were paper thin on the perimeter and obviously up front. They're just god awful. Mo, is it just the defense or is that just the biggest piece?
No, I think the biggest piece is he lost the locker room. And maybe the question is, did he have the locker room at all at any point, when he took over? I mean, let's just run through again the litany of red flags leading up to this point. But, the Terry Stotts, argument at a shoot around or a practice leading to Stotts leaving the team, red flag. Just a few games in, the team saying, hey, we've had one of the best defenses over the past few years. Why are we changing things? We want to go back to the old thing. And, good on Griffin willing to change, but also dumb on the sense of like, why are you coming in and fixing something that isn't broken? And, I think the other stuff is the Bobby Portis at the end of the in-season tournament when they got eliminated by Indiana really kind of going off. Giannis, multiple rants. I mean, everything from the equipment guy getting blame and having to do things better, which, by the way, Giannis, purely bullshit. Don't you blame the support staff ever for that stuff, especially the video guys. And I'm not saying that because I'm a former video guy and I was offended. And just across the board, we had a game where Giannis subbed himself back in because he was pissed off that he got subbed out. Like, there was just so many different things there that I just honestly, the defense, as bad as it is something I think we all expected. Just looking at the
Damian Lillard stinks playing defense. I mean, he just
that's
stinks.
Not what he does. His name trade, and I think the problem is he never got hold of the locker room, and he never got buy-in. And we always talk about it. Coaching is selling. Coaching is selling and getting players to buy into your stuff, and it's getting them to buy in every day, and they didn't. And and now he's gone.
No, that's it. Seth?
I think that there's a lot of truth to what Mo is saying. I think that the last point about coaching being selling, coaching being communicating, not just to players, but to ownership, to front office, to sort of outside stakeholders. I mean, you have to be somewhat circumspect because I'm not it's not stuff that I witnessed, but you heard even before the season started that, part of an NBA coach is you give a talk to season ticket holders and there were people who were at this. I'm like, oh boy. And it's like, okay, his first time doing it, maybe, but I compare that to an assistant coach that I worked with in Milwaukee, Darvin Ham, who had that room. Like no matter who he was speaking in front of, he had the command and could communicate and converse with that. And that's part of that is also you never know with an assistant coaches, all the things they've done well to be a good and respected assistant coach. I'm not saying they're all out the window, but it's a completely different skill set. And I think the overwhelming feeling of not even worrying about the locker room or communication and stuff like that. It just the speed of what happens on the NBA floor was too fast for him, I think, and it was too fast for this team for a lot of the years. I think it wasn't just that the defense is bad and the transition defense has been bad; it's the manner of it, sort of the frequency with which the Bucks we've talked about this before, have given up fast break layups off of their own makes, which is something that is sort of, it's like basic convert and match competency that was, part of it is, you're talking about basic competency. Well, that's a Bud team. And so the switch from that to far less than was especially jarring, but just not having that. And it's frankly not that bit of it, even as the team has sort of won some games. And I want to put a pin in that and get back to that. That overwhelming sense of sort of not having control of the things you can control was unmistakable for the entire season around this team. And it's not something that, all right, first 5 games we're figuring it out. Hasn't really gotten better over the course of the season.
No, I the other thing too, Dave, you said like the offense isn't the problem. I think some of it is. Like, they haven't fully come on, man. We all thought we were going to get Giannis Dame pick and rolls, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. We thought that would get spammed over the top a lot. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed on this team. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of that stuff. And there's some stuff that Seth actually had said as the trade happened for Dame. And I want to give Seth, some love on that when we get to it. But I just think across the board, this was just a poor job of deciding who the coach is going to be from the front office. This was a big job. This was a championship level job. And it was tough to give this to. And we've had examples of first year coaches having massive success and all that stuff. But this was a big one. And I think when you look at the fact that they passed on my all-time favorite, Nick Nurse, to hire Adrian Griffin, I think it's a surprise there in that sense. And I just think it was more, they made this decision from what it seems like for Giannis, and Giannis wanting this and wanting him as his guy and whatnot. And I think that's part of the problem as the front office, not selling Giannis on, hey, that's not didn't seem like that was their guy. And you could kind of just tell by how quickly the support went away from him in this situation. But we should also just commend the Bucks. A lot of teams would have just stayed through this for a year, and said, oh, it's okay. He'll get better. It'll work out. They're in championship mode right now. That's their goal. That's their main thing. And I think this was I feel bad for Griffin because I think this was a really bad job for him to have taken. I put him in a very bad situation as a first-time head coach. And I actually would be worried and wonder if he'd get another shot because of it.
And it's tough. I mean, look, this is, I think that this illustrates just how hard it is to assess coaches until they've become a head coach and run their own program. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I think Nick Nurse would have done a better job, right? Nick Nurse at a minimum, he has run a program before and he's done it on multiple levels. Like there's no reason to think that there would have been a huge drop off. And my guess is, as a guy who has coached at different places, I mean, continuity matters. So, Nick Nurse coming in as a new head coach, not his first rodeo as a new head coach with an established team, as we know. And what did he do in Toronto? When he took over, he didn't come in, make wholesale changes. I mean, they were lucky. They got Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, right? So they made some huge changes, but he really kept it simple. And that's how, he had so much success, right? Like you can't just mix things up. And I wonder if, some of these changes were it was too much too soon. But again, like you said, Mo, is a huge job. I also wonder if the Bucks, part of their reasoning wasn't, well, we have Giannis. And look at what Boston just did last year. Joe Mazzulla had to take over last minute, but they had the same team. This is the difference there. The continuity. If they had not made the trade, I mean, Mo, this was your point. I don't want to steal it because you made this point. But I wonder if Adrian Griffin's job isn't easier because if he had Drew Holiday, if he had just the continuity from last year.
Well, two things. One, on the continuity front, the thing about Boston that separates this is Mazzulla was at least on the staff. He was well respected on the staff and had that cachet and that equity with guys. But let me ask this question, because I asked you this, Dave, in our YouTube emergency show yesterday, and go watch that on YouTube if you need more Griffin coverage.
If you want more of this.
But Seth, let me ask you this question. Is Adrian Griffin the head coach if the Bucks knew that they were getting Damian Lillard? If we flip this around and the order of these things kind of happening and they got Dame before they got a new head coach, is Adrian Griffin the guy you go with?
It's an interesting question. I think the general understanding is that it was very likely they were going to hire an ex-player of some sort as the head coach. So that the other names that are out there were, you mentioned Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson. I think that the winds would have blown against them just because of, going like part of the wanting to move away from Bud. It was someone who related to the players a little better. And so there was a desire for an ex-player. So does that still mean it's Griffin, or does someone with, some more experience kind of get the nod? Then I don't know. That's a great question. But I think that was still like, there was still of the sort of up and coming ex-player assistants, Griffin is a guy whose name has been at the top of that list for a good long while. And so I don't think it was on its face, it was not a ludicrous hire in the moment, whether or not the trade was made. It's, again, you just sort of, you move to the big chair, responsibilities change. As Dave said, running a program is a completely different beast than, being a guy who's in charge of breaking down an opposing offense or defense, or doing like skills and vitamins training and stuff like that. And it's, this isn't the first time, and it will not be the last time that we've seen a respected former assistant get the head job and just not be able to do all those things. I mean, I think the closest analog,
it's
a
very
long list.
human.
Oh, absolutely. Right? No, the closest analog I can think is actually, goes back a bit, is, you remember Brian Shaw was, again, an ex-player, a respected guy who's a heady player in his day, was at the top of these lists for a number of years. And then he gets the chance, and it just doesn't, the same. It was a very similar almost thing, and just like, just not really able to command the respect of the players and be organized enough to have it work. And I think we saw that, and I don't think that the team that Shaw took over was a team with the same level of aspirations.
Oh no,
as the Bucks. So something you guys accused me of saying earlier off air is that I was saying that the Bucks are having a gap year. And I think what my opinion was, it was basically a gap year if they did not make a change, because with all the sort of the basic issues that they've been having, they were essentially drawing dead in the postseason. And so you had to do something to you can't, Dame is not young. Giannis's prime is not eternal. So, you can't be punting on those chances.
Yeah, I will say this. It is really, really hard to assess assistants and try to figure out who is going to make a good coach. Number one, from the outside looking in, you don't know anything. You have no idea even what his responsibilities are. You just don't know. And then there's the human aspect of this. Like, you're going to ask, like, if you're going to hire Adrian Griffin, you're probably going to call up Nick Nurse. And Nick Nurse is going to give you a glowing review of the guy who was just his assistant. I mean, this is all we know how this works.
Not when they're competing for the same job.
All right, fair. But this being said, though, it's a human relation business, and so like you might get, hey, he's the best, he's a great guy, he does all these things and he does them well, but you don't know until he's in your shop. You don't know until he's in the house. So that's it's all a crapshoot, and even with experienced coaches, I think it can be a crapshoot, because what if a guy has just completely stagnated as a coach? And you're going to bring him in.
It's not even that. Sometimes it's just a matter of you don't know how they're going to operate in your organization, right? Like we're going to obviously talk about Doc in a second, but like Doc operated one way in Boston, came to LA, different circumstances, was team president, had a whole lot more on his plate with everything that he had to do, but he felt like he could just bring everything from Boston to LA. And I would say one thing that's kind of that I think teams have to understand, what works in one city is not going to necessarily work in another city. Look, man, LA, way more distractions. Boston, snowy and cold all the time in the winter. Ain't not a lot to do. In LA, we have rain for 3 days and we think we're all building an ark. Like, it's a whole different deal.
Hey,
it all comes
Milwaukee
back to
night.
pro wrestling. There are gimmicks that work in some cities, and there are gimmicks that work in others.
Ugh,
And
I walked right into it.
First of all, I just want to say Milwaukee nightlife is undefeated. No, it's not
well,
true.
not in the winter.
Yeah.
See, okay, let's move on. I speaking of new guys coming to town. Oh, you got one more.
We should just talk. No, I'm
Oh,
going
that's
to
right.
cue up Seth here.
Seth,
But we
thank
should
you.
talk about the fact that they did just fire their coach when they were 30-13.
That's what people keep bringing up. And
So Dave, you mentioned second place in the East. If you look at like their non-garbage time point differential, they're actually 11th in the league per cleaning the glass. Which would put them, I think 6th. They're 6th in the East in point differential. Their record overstates their overall performance by the largest margin in the league. On my sort of clutch performance stuff, they are the most overperforming team in the league. And the problem, and I think it's not an accident that this happened right after they played a close game against Detroit, because they've played and won a lot of clutch games, but they're playing these clutch games against terrible teams like Detroit without Cade Cunningham for a championship level team. That's a game that should be over 6 minutes left in the third quarter. And instead it comes down to the wire, and yeah, they've pulled some of those games out. But if you play that level against a Philly, against a Denver, should you make it that far, against New York in a playoff series, I think you put yourself in trouble. And I think the 30-13 is gaudy and nice, but this team has not played at the level of a 60-ish win team or anything close.
I commend again, like, for them recognizing that and not being fooled by their record is a big thing there. Because again, they're
we've
going
talked about
for
this for years, right? We've talked about this particular aspect of managerial decision making for years with NBA teams. Bad teams hold on to bad coaches way too long. And this is like a redux of what we just saw in Atlanta last year. Worst case scenario, you're getting your new coach in for next year 6 months early. And I think that even that head start is a huge deal. Although, let's talk about this now. Doc Rivers, it's official right before we started recording. He is now going to be the new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. We don't have any contract details because they don't come out all that often on coaches unless someone's setting a record. I don't think Doc is going to be the new highest paid coach in the league. If he is, I hope that the Miami Heat, go give Spo a raise because he's the best coach ever. But Doc Rivers, officially the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Doc might not set a record, but the Bucks might set a record this year for highest compensation to head coaches, because they're
paying 3 coaches at once. I mean, now this is
I feel like the
Knicks thinking.
I feel like the Knicks still own that somehow. I feel like at some point I still feel like they're paying Herb Williams.
I will say this. Philadelphia no longer has to pay Doc Rivers. So congratulations to the 76ers on this.
Yay, billionaires still keeping.
All right, let's talk about Doc. I mean, I would say this. As far as, my job goes here today, it's very easy. Seth, you know the Bucks as well as anybody. Mo, you know Doc Rivers as well as anybody as far as a coach. How is this marriage going to work out?
I feel like you're trying to get both of us in trouble at once.
I am.
Respect that.
Absolutely.
I respect that.
Dave trying to cause problems? Yeah. Never.
So I think that at minimum, like like a lot of the baseline level stuff that we've talked about, that competency, I expect that to come back. However, again, if you're championship or bust, we've talked about this. I mean, I think that Doc as a playoff coach I don't want to say is questionable. I think we can go off far enough and say it's bad. The stat that came out that I came out with when he got let go from Philly is that the NBA as a whole, accepting Game 7 when one team's going to advance and one team's not, that the NBA as a whole wins over the last 25-ish years, when they have a chance to close a series out, win about 65% of the time. Doc has won 33% of those games. I think the stat is in up 3-1 and up 3-2, which combined the league as a whole has closed out series around 62% of the time. he is, I believe, 9-19. His teams are 9-19. And I think that is illustrative of sort of some of the struggles that I think his teams run into when you get into having to make the fine grain adjustments that are needed to happen. And it's an interesting thing, because a lot of people around, like people who were watching the Bucks who wanted to be supportive of Griffin, were noting that one of the criticisms of Budenholzer was him being too rigid, and at least Griffin was trying stuff. But I think this is a through line to Doc, in that, like, when in the past, when we've seen him try stuff in the playoffs, it's been when their backs are already against the wall and he kind of starts mashing buttons. And that was a lot of, like, Griffin's adjustments were sort of the same. It's, you think about, to use another sport analogy, since I'm at a football conference right now, is scripting plays to start a game. It's you're trying to score and stuff like that, but you're also putting a number of different things out there to see how the opposition reacts to that. And I think the coaches that adjust well, Spo, Ty Lue, they make their adjustments with a purpose. Okay, that didn't work. Let's move to the next thing, because I already know what the next thing is. I think that's something that a criticism we've had of Doc over the years is he doesn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this couldn't have played out more perfectly for Doc. If we're being perfectly honest, he was never going to get an opportunity to coach a championship caliber team until it's an in-season situation, because all the other options are gone. They couldn't call up Nick Nurse. They couldn't even call up Mike Budenholzer and say, hey, man, get off that beach, put down that drink with the umbrella in it, and, get your ass over here. They couldn't really do that. So really just their options, like, this is the only option for them if they're trying to get a high caliber coach who, he's won a championship. I mean, he lets us all know about it. It was 2008. We're all very well aware of it. He's kind of lived off of that for a long time. I think the big question is with Doc is, can he change the stuff that's gone wrong for them? Can he improve their defense? I don't know if that's a coaching problem or a personnel problem. I think it's more a personnel problem. And can he get Dame to lock in defensively? And what does that look like when Dame does that? Is he actually capable of that? I think he will do a better job of setting up the Dame Giannis pick and roll and kind of getting the message to Giannis that, hey, closing time is Dame time. And I think that's something that Giannis will have to adjust to and understand that. And I think that's exactly what Seth was talking about when this trade originally happened, was how willing Giannis would be to give that stuff up. I think Doc has a better ability to make that happen than Griffin. Like, I think there's going to be interesting stuff and wrinkles there. Look, Doc's a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. And I think that's the difference here. They got the best coach that was available on the market right now. And I don't know. It's not like I look at that and go like, okay, they're a championship team now.
Right. I will say, I want to circle back to what you talked about with Adrian Griffin and losing the locker room. I think that is one of the bigger components of hiring Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers will have that locker room. I mean, one of the things, like, he was great in Philly with that. I mean, until, obviously till the end when it wasn't, but this is how relationships go. We all know. I do think that he'll be able to
disagree, but go on.
I think, okay, yes, fair. But I do think he'll come in and he will have the locker room. This is going to be the most high-powered offensive guard he's ever coached. I just ran through, like, my Rolodex of guards that he's coached. He's had Rondo, he had Chris Paul. This is the most high-powered scoring guard he's ever gotten a chance to coach. I'm very curious to see what Doc will do with a player the caliber of Damian Lillard. I kind of have an idea. I mean, I think Giannis is going to be involved in much more pick and roll. I think he's going to have to play Seth, thank you. James Harden. I forgot he had James Harden. Okay, well, Damian Lillard. Okay, you're right.
I think
forgot.
I
yeah,
but
yeah, but I'd go down
that level.
But I do think we'll have a chance to see. Doc just took like 6 months off. I mean, maybe he's got some ideas. He has been consulting with the Bucks for about a month, it seems. So maybe he's had some time to dream up some fantasy sets that he would run if he were to theoretically take over as head coach.
Can I Can I know Mo has a grievance to air a little bit later. I have a grievance to air here, and we're all big boys and girls. I'm sick of having my intelligence insulted by the very stage managed reporting of there hasn't been any, like, this isn't beanbag. This is pro sports.
Right.
Of course that they knew who they were going to hire. They've been working on that and this is not me reporting. This is just like, this is how it works.
Welcome to
NBA
Earth.
don't do this. Yeah, NBA teams do not do this stuff for the most part on a whim. They know what's coming next, and it's just like plausible deniability that, like, because of like the sort of the unwritten rule that you don't try for another coach's job or whatever. Like, bullshit. We're trying to win a title here. And so of course that the ridiculous song and dance about was there or wasn't there an agreement already? Like, okay, there might not have been a piece of paper signed, but come on, let's be adults here. And like, you're not making this move without the next thing in place.
Dude, it was within 2 minutes his name coming up once Griffin was fired. Like, I don't even think everybody got the news Griffin was fired when they started to hear that Doc was the leading candidate for the job. Like, it's not it was the most obvious thing in the world when that's where it was going. You know, like, I texted friends saying, "Oh, Doc's getting that job." You know, once CNN confirmed the report, I'm going to keep harping on that. CNN Sports. Once CNN Sports, hit it, they sent me a text message. Mo, you called it. I said, I didn't call it. It was obvious. It was right there in front of us. Like, it's not I didn't know he was consulting, but like, just the pure fact that the report came back so quickly and there were no other names mentioned. Like, yeah, and it made sense. He was the only real option in that stuff, in the way this all goes and the way that kind of plays out. So it wasn't a surprise by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, you're not going to stretch this thing out. You're not in this situation. You need to win games now. You're trying to get the 1 seed. I don't know if that's too far gone at this point for them in the standings, but you sure as hell don't want to drop to third, or even fourth, because Cleveland's coming up. But like, you don't want to stretch this out. But now the other thing is, and this is what's going to be really interesting, I'm very curious to see what Doc does with the staff. How many guys does he keep? Does he?
Well, he's got to keep Joe Prunty. You guys know how I feel about this.
Well,
Joe
Prunty, Dave will storm the castle.
That's Dave right. We need to keep Joe Prunty.
I bet he coaches tonight, Dave, when they play Cleveland. I bet he coaches even their next game. I think Doc still needs to kind of get all his stuff together. The weather here isn't that great in LA, so I don't know if he's going to be able to go golfing today one last time. But I think the opportunity is like he's going to start building his staff. So there is going to be changes there. It is going to be a bit of a transition. Like, guys are going to have to adjust. It's going to be a whole different deal of him kind of figuring out his staff, who he's bringing in and whatnot. And, I also hope Austin Rivers gets dressed and ready to go. I imagine, he might get a call.
Please sign him.
I mean, their backup point guard situation, like,
no, they need him.
Actually, they could use Austin Rivers.
They could use him.
Although,
I gotta say, I'm trying not to be a dick, but
saw
they could use
Austin
him
on TV the other day. He's pretty good. I don't mind Austin Rivers on TV. Pretty good. Seth, you got one more point before we put a bow on this?
No, this is. I mean, the whole thing is like the coaching equivalent of a free agent signing at 12:01 at the wow, they negotiated that fast. Like,
yeah,
this is the kabuki of this. Just like it's so transparent and it annoys me. And I hate that we pretend to play this game. That
big part of our job, and not to let you guys see the wizard or anything, but a big part of our job is pretending like we didn't know something was happening for a couple of weeks. Why were we all so prepared for Pascal Siakam to? For him to go to Indiana? It's because we've been talking about it for 6 months. Like, all of this stuff is, it's a steamroller coming at half a mile an hour that we're watching just come down the road. I mean, like, this is like when Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell were in Utah, and about 75% of my job was pretending that they had a chance to win a title. It's more fun if I pretend. So anyway, to put a bow on this, I want to ask you guys just up front. Because I don't look. This is not a lost season, especially now that they pulled the plug and I think brought in a whether better or not, a coach more suited to the job. Do the Bucks win the title this year?
No.
I mean, No.
Obviously, the choice is the field, but do you
Yeah.
see a scenario like can they pull this off?
Oh, they have it. I mean, they were drawing dead before, and they got a chip in a chair now.
Yeah, they have
Like,
chances.
Yeah.
Their
So, I
chances
mean, I think-
improve.
But I think would I have them in the top 3 or 4 teams that are likely to win the title? I don't think so. I think that I would have, I mean, I haven't thought of it in this way before now, but I think I would have Boston, Philly, the Clippers, and Denver all I don't know, but all favorites over them. I mean, who do I think is more likely to win the championship between them and OKC? Like, I think the experience factor goes to Milwaukee, but I think from a talent and Mark Daniel is unproven as a playoff coach, but I think we think extremely highly of him as a coach. I think in a playoff coaching adjustment situation, I think we'd probably lean OKC that way also. So I think, but at the same time, there's still a team you have to account for in that calculation.
I would go. Hold on. I would say this: barring a trade, I think they'd be in the top. That they would be out of the top 4, as Seth was talking about. What I would say, I would make sure Seth hears this part here for a second. You know,
We had an alarm going off in the background, so we had to go fix it.
and it was driving me nuts. I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a creepy way, as if like a creepy music sort of thing as Seth was talking. And I was like looking over my shoulder thinking somebody was about to kill me.
In this like aromatherapy hotel room that has like funny music and lights and like orange blossoms in the shower.
Football just does things so much differently than basketball.
But I wanted to say this. I totally disagree with you in the OKC versus Milwaukee thing. Listen, as great as OKC is, there's a lot of unprovenness of them in the playoffs. Like, they're awesome. I got to watch them, and I'll be honest with you, they struggled against the Clippers. They got beat by the Lakers twice. Like, the way I look at them, like, I know it's kind of the lull of the season and whatnot. I would put Milwaukee ahead of them. Not saying OKC doesn't have a chance, but I'm just saying Milwaukee's chances got to be higher than OKC if we're looking at comparing those two championship odds. But you're right, and they're out of the top 4 right now, barring a trade where they can bring in a guy like Caruso or something like that.
Okay, so that's a pin on that one. More big news that we can react to, guys. We had a trade yesterday. Terry Rozier leaving Charlotte, the black hole of suck that the team is, been traded to the Miami Heat. What an upgrade. He's traded for Kyle Lowry and a 2027 first-round pick. Seth, you're doing like field goal.
No,
Did you kick a field goal here?
This is so I have, before we, like you said, mentioned the black hole of Charlotte. Charlotte is, I believe, 10-11 in games that are in the clutch and 0-20 in games that aren't. Their largest win this season has been by 7 points. There hasn't been, I've only gone back to 1970-71, but in that time period, there's never been a team that didn't have at least one double-digit win in a season. So
are they worse than the Pistons secretly?
No. They're 30th in net rating.
They have less talent, I think.
They have less talent, but at least they play the talent they have.
A better coach. So
no, to try or for purposes of what they're trying to achieve, maybe they're worse coached. Like achievement in draft pick equity. Oscar goes to,
that's a fair point. Let's talk about the Kyle Lowry part of this real quick, because Rozier is he's going to play in Miami. He's going to be a part of a contender, and Lowry is likely going to be a buyout guy. Unfortunately, the new CBA makes it fairly unlikely he's going to be able to go play for a contender. The new tax rules, they prohibit, signing buyout guys, and that's rough, man. Kyle Lowry, I think, could contribute. I mean, we talked about the Bucks needing a backup point guard. I mean, could he fill in there and help them out? I just don't think he's going to get the opportunity.
They can't sign him. Like Phoenix can't. I think the one team that can is Philadelphia, which is it's from Philadelphia also. So,
could we handle Joel Embiid and Kyle Lowry on the court together at the same time?
That would be a lot of falling down.
I hope he signs in Philly. That would be fun.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about Terry Rozier part of this. Obviously, Miami, I don't know how they do this. They're always in the mix. He is a huge pickup for them. They've needed some more potent guard play. They need another guy who can score a little bit because that's been one of their big problems this season. And Terry Rozier is a guy. I mean, he's played in the playoffs. He's got experience. I like this fit a lot.
Yeah, I like it for Miami. It makes sense. I mean, just replacing Kyle Lowry, who really wasn't giving you much, hasn't really fit with the team, to be honest, ever since he got there. So, like, it's an upgrade in that sense. You know, how much of an upgrade is this? Like, okay, you go from maybe the 6th seed to the 4th seed. Like, I don't know. Here's the thing about Miami. You always have to be afraid of them. Just because the way the organization operates, the way Spo gets the most out of everybody. You know, like, I'm going to take a shot at Portland. Brace yourselves, guys. I know you just had the ice storm, but here comes some heat. How bad does it look now that they just had no interest in Jaime Jaquez? How bad does that look? Because that dude's a baller.
I don't think they had. I think that the Heat had no interest in trading them. Jaime Jaquez.
They could have gotten Jaquez if in that situation. I honestly believe that. And if they really pushed, they didn't even, you know what? They would have never known because they didn't fucking engage. But that's a whole other story for another time. But that's a massive miss for them. He's better than anything they got in that trade.
Next on 5 Reasons Sports.
Oh,
wow.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, but
I think, go ahead.
But I just think with Miami, like, that's a great fit, tough guard, everything that he does. The game, like, I think him and Bam in the second side or DHO actions in the second unit are going to be something to really kind of watch for. At the end of the day, like, this team's a playoff team, and that means they're a pain in the ass when you have to play them in the playoffs. So, like, I don't know if it makes them puts them up in the contender list or whatever, but I think it puts them in a better position than where they were, just for purely upgrading on the fact that Lowry wasn't giving them much. And Lowry has looked washed. Every now and then we'd see flashes, but that was about it.
I think, I mean, one way to think about this is Rozier is going to give them like the gold-plated version of what they got from Gabe Vincent last year.
Right.
Like, he's like,
don't disrespect Gabe Vincent.
No, I'm not disrespecting Gabe Vincent, but Terry Rozier is like a similar, like maybe undersized combo guard, but very physically tough and you know, an athletic.
Well, he fits Miami spiritually.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, he is a Miami Heat guy.
And you know, low-key has been, you know, has turned himself into a very effective shooter. And you know, we had never hear about him because he's in, you know, the vortex,
black hole of
Charlotte. Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a good pickup for them. Be interesting to see if this kind of, you know, not to look too far ahead, but we are entering trade season. If this sort of sets what I think is a pretty reasonable market for, like, you know, players of that level, good but not star players, like, you know, an expiring in a first is it's not nothing. But Charlotte, I think it's a decent deal for Charlotte. So, you know, in the last couple of years, we've seen teams, you know, step forward. Fred VanVleet, we've seen teams kind of play themselves by not saying yes to a good offer for players in this kind of situation. And so maybe that helps set the market at a more rational level. And we see some of these, you know, the Malcolm Brogdons and whoever else you want to say are the interesting kind of last piece targets around the league kind of do end up moving towards the deadline.
I mean, I think also the other thing is this is probably the start of a fire sale in Charlotte. They're trying to get more picks. You know, I don't think they'll find a home for Gordon Hayward, but they're going to try. You know, and that's another guy that would probably qualify for an expiring and a first as well. Maybe not a high first, but I think, like, you know, there's going to be a lot of stuff circling around them. So it's a good move for Miami. It helps them. I don't know if it makes them any more of a contender than not. I'd still be afraid to play them in the playoffs. You know, like, they're just a tough ass team, plain and simple. I mean, this team is built for playoff. Like, just ask all the teams they knocked out last year. All of them, you know, like, they're a tough team. And I think that's going to be the challenge for them kind of challenge for everybody else going forward is this team got a little tougher.
Yeah. You guys watched Joel score 70 the other night, right?
Yes.
Okay. Number one, I'm going to say this. Victor Wembanyama was incredibly impressive in that game. Incredibly impressive. Yes, offensively. Nobody's guarding Embiid. Joel Embiid was absurd in that game. Mo, I have this. We talk about this a lot off air, but I'm going to bring it onto the podcast. There is a perception that Joel Embiid is just bum hunting. And I know that the San Antonio Spurs are a bunch of bums outside of Victor Wembanyama. What Joel Embiid is doing the last few weeks, especially, I mean, he's averaging 40 a game for like his last 16 or 17 games. This is insane. This in the modern NBA, like this just doesn't happen.
I'm more just tired of the whole conversation around Embiid now at this point. In the same way, I was tired about it with Giannis. I was tired when we did it with Jokic. We've done it with everybody, but it's okay. None of this shit matters until he wins a championship or has playoff success. Yes, Embiid has had playoff failure after playoff failure after playoff failure for a variety of reasons. Some of it's incredibly bad luck, like, the new coach of Milwaukee keeping him in the game. That's obviously a blowout and he takes an elbow to the face and has an orbital fracture. Like there's a whole bunch of different weird things that have happened around him. There's also been just massive playoff failures around him, right? Like losing that game 7 against Atlanta. That's also on him. We can scream about Ben Simmons all we want. He had like 1,000 turnovers that game. There's all of those things, but I am just tired of constantly every time a guy has something that's amazing and an accomplishment to play down something to scoring 70 points in a game to then go, well, he's got to do it in the playoffs. Fuck off. That only 14 guys have done that. Okay? Like, just get the fuck out of here with this. I'm tired of it. Okay? Yeah, we're going to be on these guys. They can't do it until they do it. We've done it with everybody, and it's tired. We did it all the way to Jordan. Jordan used to just be considered a guy that you can't win a championship when. Motherfucker won 6. No, I'm dropping a lot of F-bombs. Sorry, dude. You're doing, I mean, it's just unbelievable in that, like, we just can't enjoy it, and it's all that stuff. Yes, he's beating up on bad teams. He's supposed to beat up on bad teams.
That's right.
Like, what's he supposed to do? He's supposed to torture Wemby, who couldn't keep up with him physically. He's supposed to destroy Zach Collins. Like, come on, man. Like, what are we supposed to do in all of this stuff? Like, he's doing it within the flow of the offense.
It's not his fault Philadelphia plays Detroit 18 times a season.
Bring it up with the schedule makers. But, like, the constant just do it in the playoffs. And we did this with Jokic. We did this with Giannis. Can't get it done. Can't get it done. Da-da-da. All we care about in that sense. I'm tired of it. Let's enjoy the stuff that we're getting. And if he never gets it done in the playoffs, that will be part of his legacy. Unbelievable regular season player. Great. Because I'm going to watch his ass in the regular season. Because he's doing amazing things. And it's incredible efficiency. I've never seen a big man hit the mid-range jumpers like this since Dirk. Like at that point, where it's just so comfortable and so easy in that regard. I'm just tired of it, man. It's to the point where even Embiid brings it up in post-game press conferences. Won't matter until I do it in the playoffs. Like, come on, man.
They're, Embiid and Jokic as big men, 3-level scorers is so hard for us to wrap our heads around, I think. His mid-range game is just absurd. The other thing that happened that night, I don't know if you got a rant on this one, Mo, but I hope you do. A big man scoring 62 in a game and getting benched down the stretch. Karl Anthony Towns, he might have, I was texting with Ben Taylor from Thinking Basketball. He said that Karl Anthony Towns may have had the fastest 50-point game in NBA history. I'm sure he'll, do a video if that's the case. But he was hunting. And apparently the story came out that at halftime, the Timberwolves saw what Embiid did. And they decided, hey, KAT, how about we get you 70? And they lost to the Charlotte Hornets.
In a clutch game. In a clutch game.
In a clutch game.
All the way Charlotte wins. Yeah. And Terry Rozier was great in that game, and that was his last game.
Am I wrong here for feeling like I'm a little bit out on Minnesota right now?
It's unserious.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think that we've gone round and round on KAT and sort of Mo's point is well taken about Embiid. He does, I think, to be in the level of the conversation he would like to put himself, he does have to do it in the playoffs. That's all true, but the difference between like Embiid and then KAT in terms of that level of trust is just a huge margin. And I think this game is such a perfect encapsulation of that.
It's everything we're afraid for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the playoffs, right? Decision making, being smart, being mature. They kept saying it at the end of the post-game press conferences, talking maturity. Not a surprise Mike Conley didn't play that game, and all the maturity went out the fucking window. God. And it's just the it's all gone in that sense. And I think the thing that's different, the difference between the 70-point game that Embiid had and the 62-point game that Towns had was Embiid's was in the flow of the offense. It's how they've operated, and then he just dominated. They were gunning for Towns, trying to get him everything, and the dude ran out of gas. And I think that's the important thing there, and that took them completely out of their rhythm. That took them completely out of their flow. They built an 18-point lead, and Charlotte came storming back in the fourth quarter. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that KAT was gunning to the point that Finch just said, screw it, I got to put you on the bench, man. You're killing us. And they weren't even defending. Embiid was doing all the other things in that game that he played. He had like 18 rebounds in that 70-point game. That gets kind of lost in there. It was like 18 or 17, something like that.
He was dominant in that game.
He was all over the place.
Yeah.
5 assists. Like, he was making great passes. He had a beautiful dime to Kelly Oubre underneath the basket on a cut. Like, there's a bunch of different things. KAT was gunning. And you could see it when you watched the two. I watched both of those. I broke both of those down on my Twitch stream. And just saying, like, you can kind of see the difference in that game, in that stuff. And I think that was the difference between the two. Was one was in the flow of the offense, the other one was gunning for it. And not to say Embiid doesn't gun for things. He's continuing to try this 30-point scoring thing or whatnot.
I think the 70-point game was a little bit of gunning. That's Victor Wembanyama. I'm gonna put him in the basket as many times as I possibly can. But hey, guess what? It's a great strategy. That's winning basketball. Karl Anthony Towns, and I'm not going to be one of these guys who's like, you're 6'10", why you're shooting all these jumpers? But you're 6'10", and you can dribble, and you can do stuff. You don't have to live and die by the jump shot. As a matter of fact, Karl Anthony Towns, if he had made the same evolution that Joel Embiid has made into a true 3-level guy where he's got this mid-range game, so if you guard him at the 3-point line, he can get to the mid-range, he can get to the basket. I think we feel differently about him, but also, it's the defensive end. He doesn't bring any of the intensity that Joel Embiid does. And Joel Embiid brings that intensity against the good teams, the bad teams, and the in-between. And that's the difference between those two guys. I just felt like the dichotomy between the 70 game and the 62-point game was fascinating because it's two incredibly talented players, one extremely serious and one that I just don't think he's ever going to win anything.
It's his 9th year, and we're talking about maturity.
Yeah.
And
we're always going to talk about it. He's just not mature, dude. It's like you said, unserious.
And it's and I think that there's a stat we've talked about a little bit, which is turnovers. KAT had 7. And if you want to look at one of the Achilles heels, I think that the Timberwolves face as a playoff team is both KAT and Naz Reid, for big men, they can shoot a little, they can put it on the floor. The problem is when both of them are very turnover prone when they drive. And so this is, I think is it a skill set thing? Is it a maturity thing? It's some of both. But I think that you're going to see in the playoffs that there's going to be a lot of them getting crowded and then trying to dribble into traffic and trying to make a play and tossing up bad shots or charging or picking up a charge or just losing the ball in traffic. And I think that's going to prove to be something that really gets in the way of them being able to play the way they would want to play in a postseason setting.
Well, I think that this is a pretty good place to stop for the week. Unless you guys got anything else before we close up shop.
No, I used all my F-bombs.
Yeah, you used all your F-bombs this week. All right. Well, for Seth Partnow and Mo DeKeel, I'm Dave DeFore, and this has been Nerder, she wrote, on the Athletic NBA Show.